You know, it sounds crazy, right? A peace treaty that's actually more destructive than the war it was supposed to end. But believe it or not, right in the middle of World War I, a treaty like that was signed. Its story is just wild. We're going to dive into the Treaty of Brest Litovsk. So, let's get right into it. The whole idea seems impossible, doesn't it? I mean, how can peace possibly be worse than war? Well, in 1918, that's exactly what happened. Russia signed a deal that basically traded away its entire future just to stop the fighting. And the consequences? They were absolutely staggering. So you've got to be asking, why would any country sign such a horrible deal? To get that, we need to rewind a little and look at what was going on inside Russia. By 1917, the country was at a complete breaking point. Okay, so picture this. After 3 really long, brutal years fighting Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Russian army was just shattered. We're talking soldiers at the front lines without enough bullets, sometimes not even enough warm clothes. And back home, people were starving. All that anger and desperation just boiled over and exploded into this huge revolution that totally toppled the government.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Out of all that chaos, a revolutionary group called the Bolsheviks, led by a guy named Vladimir Lenin, seized control. They came to power with this super simple but really powerful slogan, peace, bread, and land. And they were dead serious about it, especially that first part. Their #1 priority was getting Russia out of the war, and they wanted it done right away.
So how do you do that? Well, the first thing the Bolsheviks did was call for an armistice. Now what's that? The easiest way to think about it is like a timeout in the middle of a war. All the fighting just stops so that both sides can actually sit down and start talking about a real peace treaty. It was the critical first step to getting Russia out of the game. But, you know, these peace talks, they did not go as planned. Not even close. Germany looked at Russia, saw how weak it was, and saw a huge opportunity. They realized they could crush their enemy, not with more fighting, but with just a pen and paper. And the deal they put on the table, it was absolutely brutal. Man, these negotiations were so tense. Talks kicked off in December 1917. The main Russian negotiator, a guy named Trotsky, he tried to stall for time. He was kind of hoping that a revolution would break out back in Germany and save him. But that didn't happen. By February 1918, the Germans completely lost their patience and just started invading again. Russia was backed into a corner. With literally no other options left, they signed the treaty on March 3rd. So, what was the price for this peace? It was just enormous. First up, let's talk about the land. Russia had to give up 300,000 square miles of its territory. Now that's a number that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, so let's put it this way. That's an area bigger than the entire state of Texas. Just gone. And losing all that land was bad enough, but believe it or not, the economic hit was even worse. I mean, just look at this. Russia lost about 1/3 of its entire population, over half of its industry, and this is the real kicker, 90% of its coal mines. You have to remember, coal was the fuel that powered everything back then, so this one treaty basically crippled the entire Russian economy overnight.
And the specific pieces of land Russia lost were also a huge deal. We're talking about Finland, the Baltic states, that's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and big chunks of Poland, all gone. But the biggest blow of all, that was Ukraine. Russia was forced to recognize Ukraine as an independent country, and by doing that, they lost control of a region so famous for its farmland, it was literally called the breadbasket of Europe.
Okay, so this treaty wasn't just a Russian problem. Oh no, it sent total shockwaves across the entire world and completely changed the game for the final year of World War I. So here's the key thing to get. Russia made peace with the Central Powers. That was the alliance led by Germany. And with Russia now officially out of the war, Germany was free to turn its full, undivided attention to, well, everyone else. And this was a massive, massive game changer. For years, Germany had been stuck fighting a two-front war. They had Russia in the east and countries like Britain and France in the west. It was splitting their army in two. But now, with Russia gone, they could take all those soldiers, all those resources from the east, and move them over to the Western Front in France. For the Allies, this was an absolute nightmare. All of a sudden, they were seriously outnumbered and staring down the barrel of a giant, new German offensive. So, as you can probably guess, Russia's former allies were not happy. They were furious. They felt totally betrayed, like the Bolsheviks had just stabbed him in the back. And they were genuinely terrified that Germany, with all these new troops, could actually win the entire war. They were so desperate they even sent their own soldiers to Russian ports to try and do something, anything, to intervene. But here's the thing.
While this treaty was busy reshaping the World War, its most violent and lasting impact was actually back inside Russia itself. That peace it was supposed to bring, it turned out to be a total illusion.
So many people in Russia felt completely humiliated. They felt like their country had been sold out by this treaty. And all that anger boiled over and fueled a massive, bloody civil war. You had opponents of the Bolsheviks, they were called the Whites, rising up to fight the Bolshevik government, who were called the Reds. And this new war, this civil war, was somehow even more brutal than the one they had just left.
And that right there is the tragic irony of it all, isn't it? A deal that was signed to finally bring peace to Russia. Instead, it plunged the country into an even more destructive civil war, a war that would end up killing millions of its own people.
And here's maybe the craziest part of the whole story. After causing all that chaos, all that destruction, the treaty itself didn't even last a year. Seriously, it was signed in March of 1918, but just 8 months later, in November, Germany lost World War I. The very next year, the winners, the Allies, made Germany sign a new treaty, the famous Treaty of Versailles, and one of the things it did was completely cancel the Treaty of Brest Litovsk. Just like that, it was gone.
So after all that, what are we supposed to take away from this? Well, for one, Brest Litovsk is a perfect, chilling example of a harsh victor's peace. But it's also a lot more complicated. Kind of ironically, it gave the new Bolshevik government just enough breathing room to survive that critical first year. It also showed the Allies just how punishing Germany could be, which you could bet influenced how they wrote their own treaty at Versailles. And on top of all that, it was a huge step on the road to independence for countries like Poland and the Baltic states.
And all of this leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. We know Germany lost the war, and the treaty was thrown out. But what if they had it? What if that new map of Eastern Europe drawn up at Brest Litovsk had actually stuck around? It's just a powerful reminder of how one single piece of paper can completely change the course of history.